You're listening to Lifing Coast to Coast, the live stream podcast where we explore trending topics and personal development, wellness, and the art of lifing in today's ever-changing world. Join us every Saturday for insightful, relatable, and lively discussions that empower and inspire. I'm moderator Miki here with the co-hostesses with the mostesses, Dr. Lovey and Heidi. And before we do begin, I just want us to take some time to acknowledge and send some love and light and comfort to those in California and the LA area who were affected by the devastating fires. Mm-hmm. It's a scary time in our world, and if you are listening in from California today, know that our hearts at Lifing Coast to Coast are with you.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Miki. And for those of you who are still going through it or have been going through it, just a really important note here for all of you. In addition to the love that we're sending your way, we want you to know that you are going to need a lot of self-care in the wake of this natural disaster. You're going to maybe not feel it sooner, but when you do feel it later, please, please, please take good care of yourself.
And that's what we're talking about today. Self-care beyond the bubble bath, building a life you don't need to escape from, because too often self-care is reduced to candles and chocolate cake and spa days and manicures, and those are all great, but true self-care goes a lot deeper than that. What's that Brianna Wiest quote that you like, Heidi?
It's that true self-care is not salt baths and chocolate cake. It's making the choice to build a life that you don't need to regularly escape from.
Yeah. So for this episode, we're going to be redefining what self-care means. We're going to be discussing topics like standards and boundaries and expectations, and then also provide some practical tips to take back your life. So let's get into it.
Get into it.
I love this topic because I just want to say that you two taught me how. You taught me how to self-care. There's no one who's better to explain this than you two.
Yeah. And it's not selfish. Self-care is not selfish.
Yeah, that's always what I thought it was. So can you explain more about that? Like what is this like radical self-care definition that I hear so much about?
Well, first I was thinking about selfishness and how it's a lot of times it's used to shame people, right? Especially women. I mean, it is for prioritizing ourselves. But the truth is that being selfish, it's not a bad thing. Uh, I know that sounds bad because it's not really about being selfish. It's about being self-full. So that's about thriving instead of surviving. It's about self-preservation. It's about empowerment. And so I think that with radical self-care, we're flipping the narrative of what being selfish is. Heidi, what are your thoughts?
Well, the point I want to make at this juncture is that extreme self-care is serious business. It's not the bubble baths and the spa dates and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. We've said that, but what it is about is building self-esteem, becoming emotionally strong and empowered, mm-hmm. and developing the kind of character that makes you decisive and clear and honest about who you are and what you want. And, contrary to common fears and beliefs, as you said, it's not about being selfish, but it's about having integrity. And when we take good care of ourselves, we have the time and the space and the energy to give to others because we want to. And we do so from a place of love, not out of habit or guilt or obligation. And that makes the experience richer for not only us, but for the people that we are able to give ourselves to, right?
So why do you think that so many of us we feel guilty when we prioritize our needs?
Ah, because that's how we were raised. We were taught to put others before ourselves. Probably for many of us, explained in a sentence just like that. You
Yeah.
put others before yourself, dear.
Yeah. And so that's not true guilt then, because real guilt is if I've harmed you, if I've harmed somebody else, guilt is there to help us to learn and to do better. This is more of a tendency to want to caretake, right? And you, like you said, it's societal, that pressure, that societal pressure of prioritizing other people and neglecting ourselves.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 And being a caretaker in a relationship goes beyond nurturing and supporting a partner. An actual caretaking,
Hmm.
frame of mind is a state where you identify with being wrapped up in taking care of the other person, often at the cost of your own needs. And this isn't love or devotion. This is a form of emotional codependency.
Yeah.
And so we're talking about a dynamic here where you might feel responsible for their happiness, their decisions, or even their emotional stability. And we cannot take care of ourselves while feeling responsible for someone else's emotional states. We just can't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I know we're going to talk about expectations later, but that's where a lot of expectations come in. Is we are doing these things for other people as it's depleting us. And then we have expectations. And when our expectations don't get met, then there's resentment, right? So,
Yeah. And the telltale sign that you need a self-care upgrade is, are you continuously breaking promises to yourself once you've planned ways to take care of your emotional, physical, and spiritual health? Do you live in a chronic state of resentment because you do so much for others that you don't have time to do the things you want to do?
yeah,
And are your relationships centered more on what you have to offer than on a mutual give and take? And if you have ever fantasized about buying a one-way ticket to anywhere but where you are, that's an extreme uh knock on the window pane that you need some radical self-care.
yeah. I told y'all this before, and I know that it's become a cliche now to talk about putting the oxygen mask on yourself first, but this is actually something that really happened with me. I used to fly a lot when I was a kid. I'm a military brat. And I remember being on the plane and hearing the flight attendant or the pilot, whoever was saying it at the time, that, if the oxygen pressure drops in the cabin, the mask is going to fall down. And if you're flying with small children or vulnerable people or elderly adults, make sure that you put the mask on yourself first. And I remember being a kid and thinking, that is so jacked up. Why would you not take care of your kid? Because that's how I was taught, that selflessness. Um, and I got to a point where I was saying yes to everything. I was really burnt out with work. And I was on a business trip, and this was back in 2004, so I was already an adult at this point, of course. And they went through that whole spiel, and I was so depleted and so burnt out that when they went over that, if the oxygen pressure drops in the cabin, if you're flying with small children, make sure to put your mask on first. And it slapped me upside my face, where I was like, oh my gosh, if I am dead, how am I going to care for anybody else? Because I don't have oxygen. And I know it seems so silly and simple, but it really hit me in that moment, because I was so depleted. And that's what being self full is. You fill your cup first, and then everything you have is extra. Like if you put your oxygen mask on yourself first, everything you have is extra. Your cup runneth over. And then you can give without resentment. You can give without taking, from your own needs. We talk about parents, especially moms. Not that it's always this way, but not getting any time to themselves and locking themselves in the bathroom or in the pantry. What would you suggest in those situations where they're not giving, or they feel because if they don't do it, nobody else is going to.
Well, you have to self-assess. You have to say, oh my God, this is crazy. Getting 15 minutes in a bathroom, getting, 20 minutes peace in a pantry. That is not adequate. It won't, it will eventually derail you in ways that you don't even see coming. It's unhealthy. Yeah.
I would expect you would have to get really honest with yourself, because I think that when you're in it, you're just taking care of everybody as a former people pleaser. What would you say to those people who just can't really get out of that phase of, I have to serve everybody and please everybody all the time? What would you say to them?
Well, you're destined to burn out. You're destined to, have to face something, whether that's an existential crisis. I can tell you that for a lot of women, it comes in the form of some really uncomfortable empty nesting.
Mm.
Then you feel like you're devoid of purpose, and and you realize you never paid any attention. It's like, you know essentially, for a lot of people, putting their dreams aside. And self-neglect can look like,
Mm.
literally saying to people, oh, I don't have time to meditate, or I would never go anywhere without my family. I don't do girls trips,
Yeah.
whatever that is. It
Mhm.
shows up for a lot of people like, dutiful. And uh it is a bit of a martyr syndrome, to be truthful.
Yeah, it really is. And it does lead to the resentment for sure. I don't know. I had a hard time saying no at one point, and I think that that's a big part of it. Just that needing to say yes and feeling like you're going to be judged or criticized by other people, especially when it's so ingrained in you and it's part of your culture. Maybe it's part of your religion or your spiritual beliefs to put everybody else before yourself. So what would you tell somebody that you're working with on being able to say no?
Well, being able to say no is really the jumping off place. You know what I mean? I mean, it is, identifying the need to have a couple of things, in place. For one, let's just talk about, kind of the inception of this self-care piece, and then I'll jump in on that one. The first book that ever came out in my memory was in 2009, and it was a book written
Mhm.
by Cheryl Richardson.
Yeah.
And it was entitled The Art of Extreme Self-Care. And it's a good book. Even to this day, it was, there was a new edition in 2019. So it's been updated since then. But basically, there are 12 components, and she does the book in sort of 12 months, right? So the very first chapter, so the very first month of this practice, that chapter is entitled If You're Tired, Rest, right? So it's like that's how you focus on identifying and prioritizing your needs. And in this chapter, it's where you learn to say no to things that drain you and
Mhm.
say yes to things that rest and rejuvenate you. So with people who cannot even, they're like, oh no, I can't even imagine doing that. That's just so foreign to me. I would just start really slowly. And I would start with, if you're tired, rest and say no to things that drain you. And sometimes it's not saying no to your own family or anything like that. It's
Yeah.
saying no to the other volunteer that calls you and says, hey, can you do the cupcakes, for 80 people next Wednesday morning? And your natural go-to is, yeah, of course I can. But in that moment, you're like, let me get back to you on that. And that's how I get people to baby step it, not to say no, because they're not going to say no when they're used to saying yes. But if they can lean into, I'm going to get back to you on that. That's a step in the right direction, right?
Absolutely. My form of self-care for a long time was drinking. I think that's how I took care of myself was okay, it's my time, wine time, wind down time. And which is okay every once in a while, but if it becomes your only way, that's not good. It's not good at all. So yeah, being able to say no, that can be tough. And it is harder to make those changes with family. So sometimes, starting with strangers or the PTA person making cupcakes or whatever. I think that's really cool. That's a good start, Heidi.
Yeah, it's a baby step. It's doable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When we were talking about radical self-care, I was thinking about being able to tap into creativity, being able to have fun, doing leisurely things. I think that I gave up a lot of that stuff for for at least a few years, especially having kids. And I don't think that that is necessary. I think that that can be part of it. That you can incorporate leisure, you can incorporate fun, you can incorporate creativity. Those things are necessary. It's part of our wellness. So to me, I guess that's what radical self-care would be, is it's not just always going to look glamorous, like, you know, going and getting a manicure, like I said, or, spending money on things like pampering yourself. Sometimes it will look like, when I come into town, I'm not going to be staying with you, or, I'm going to, take a break. I need you to watch the kids this weekend, or whatever. Yeah.
I have a question from our live stream audience. This is very interesting. How do you balance saying no to things that drain you, but still fulfill certain obligations? Like sometimes we have to do things out of obligation. So how do you say no to that?
Yeah. It's a great question.
Sometimes we do. Sometimes we do have to say yes to things out of obligation, if it's work related and, you don't want to jeopardize your role there or whatever that is, then you have to make peace with that. But you can also use it to, maybe bargain with that a little bit and figure out how to do it differently. But, it's hard to say no. Well, I'll use an example. For me, radical self-care for me in this stage of my life involved me making a decision to move from the West Coast all the way to the East Coast, to improve my husband and my daily life, for us to be able to buy a house,
Yeah.
to live in a place that we wanted to, and all of that. It necessitated us leaving California. So I literally moved 3,000 miles away from my only daughter after she was newly married and had just, started her life. And that was radical self-care and really hard. But, had I stayed, it would have been a detriment to me that I probably, it would have cost me in ways that I can't explain to everybody, but, I understand intrinsically what that would have meant to me. And outwardly, it looks very selfish. Like, how could you do that? People questioned me. They judged me. Who does that? Well, clearly I do. And even my daughter, had a hard time with that, and understandably so. And now, she's expecting her first child. It breaks my heart that I'm not on that coast, of course. But I also know that it was important for me, and I have never regretted it. I miss being close to her, but I made this decision so that I could improve my own life such that I'm filling up my cup, which will be something that will overflow to all of my children.
Yeah. How do you deal with that fear of judgment or that criticism that you?
I cannot entertain other people's opinion of me. That would do me no good. That wouldn't serve me in any way. And every one of us is different. And, for many people, the decision I made is like unthinkable. And I respect them for that. It's unthinkable for them, but it's not unthinkable for me, so I won't, I won't judge anybody, but I also won't sit in judgment. That's self-care right there. Judge
Yeah.
me all you want. I'm good with me. I am good with me, And when my children were small, I was very fortunate. I chose to be a stay-at-home mother. I got to give them a lot of my attention and time and resources. But I also had stipulations to be a stay-at-home mom, and that was that I had nanny care and housekeeping care and all those things, which we fortunately could afford. But I also went on girls' trips. I went skiing with my kids, and I also went skiing without my kids. We went on a family vacation a couple times a year, but I also went on vacations with just my husband and with just my friends. And, I kept it super real. I gave myself me time a lot. And I have no regrets about that either. It made me not be a someone who did harbor resentments. It made me not resent my life and my kids and what I was doing. So it was a very healthy thing. I didn't even know at the time what I was doing, to be honest. But
Yeah. Going back to the question, it seems like to me, if you are filling your cup, the obligations are not as taxing because your cup is full. And so then you have those things that you have to do out of obligation, but you still have already put yourself and your needs first at
yeah,
that point. Yeah.
absolutely. And Miki, I know I didn't answer that question specifically, but I will say, how you do that is you sit down and you get really real with yourself, maybe even pull out a piece of paper and make a pro con. If I do this obligation, what am I going to be giving up? If I don't do this obligation, what am I going to be gaining? Right. And then you have to make peace with those two things. And that's where I said you can bargain. Maybe you can say, I can do this, but I can't do that. I've got the bandwidth for this, but this will kill me, and sometimes we need to have those hard conversations with ourselves first, and then we sell it to whoever we have to sell it to.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love that. We love a tool. We love a visual tool. Um, there's a question here. What's one self-care practice that each of you has that always brings you joy every time you do it?
That's a good question. This is going to seem like it really brings you joy. However, it really does. I have Thursdays and Sundays where this is the thing. We are tethered to our phone with a lot of us are with our jobs and things like that. And for me, that means even if I am available, I'm not covering meetings for at work on Thursdays and Sundays because that is what I've set aside and I've put that out there that I'm not doing it on this day. And so having the freedom to, oh gosh, I should cover this, whatever, but having the freedom to just say, I can't do it. That's just not happening today.
Yeah.
That brings me joy.
It's so funny that you said that because in a word, for me, it's Sunday.
Mhm.
It's interesting because this goes all the way back to when my kids were little. And on Sunday, we actually dubbed that day Movie Madness. And any kid that wanted to hang out, could come, be with me. We would all get up on the big king size bed, and we had the TV and the speakers. And we actually we had a dance party. I forget which one of the Aid concerts it was, but we were jumping on the bed, all three of the kids and me, to ROCK in the USA, John Hoover Mellencamp live. And we were bouncing on the bed, and we broke the bed and we blew out the speakers. It was so much fun. But that was Sunday with mom, and you could go watch Movie Madness, or you could go do whatever. The boys usually were outside doing whatever, but my daughter was right there with me, and I could talk about all the 90s movies she watched. But the point is, that is a thing, and it stayed with me. And my current husband used to say, are you going to get dressed? Are you going to stay in your pajamas all day? I got so judged by that. I'm like, don't you love me in my pajamas? Like, come on now. But it's something that is now second skin for me. I don't do anything on Sunday for the most part. Once in a while, I'll do something random, like run a load of laundry. But whether I, throw on clothes or not, I spend the entire day in absolute indulgent self-care. And that could be a home facial, that could be cooking something delicious that I wouldn't normally have time to make, but I just really get into it. And I love cooking. It's therapeutic for me, but it can also mean reverting right back to the Movie Madness days and binge watching something rich and rewarding, which when I do binge watch, I have watched some crap in my day, but for the most part, I find things that really, stir my soul, but every Sunday I do it every week. So that, yeah, I feel you on that.
The
Right.
other thing, I was thinking about what I was talking about earlier about that tendency to want to uh, alleviate anybody else's discomfort and the guilt that we put on ourselves that's not healthy guilt. I used to not be able to go out to dinner with my husband without, are the kids eating? Are the grandkids eating? I would feel so guilty. I couldn't do it. But I don't have a problem with that anymore. So that brings me joy too, just being able to do those little things.
You
Yeah.
know, that actually feeling guilty about things was brought up in the live stream chat. For a person who is retired and self-scheduled, living happily outwardly may be viewed as selfish living, but I can sometimes be my worst critic because self-care for me is pausing, sitting, and doing nothing. It's hard to do without feeling guilty. So for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, because we have been bred to believe that productivity is the only measure of what kind of human we are.
Yeah.
Stay busy, get things done. Idle hands, like, come on now, you can't do anything. Why did women have to sit and do stitchery and knit things and do lace and whatever? You had to be producing. You can't
Yeah.
just, you've got to be producing. If you're not peeling potatoes, make a blanket. And, necessity, you know, was part of it back then, but now, in especially in this digital age, necessity means turning off your devices. And Lisa Marie, I know you take a digital cleanse for most of the day, Thursday and Sunday, and you're
Mhm.
not on your device. And I don't, like, I never turn my sound on. I don't know when people are reaching out to me. I don't even remember to take my phone with me anymore. I have so divorced digital life, even though I'm on my phone all day to respond to clients and to do whatever, or on a computer. It's not my life. I don't scroll. I am not sucked into that vortex. But for this retired person who has decided that they wanted to sit and, you worked your whole life to get there. Why on earth would you invite guilt to sit with you? Think about that for a minute, get really introspective on that. And, I use this point of reference a lot, and it's important because I promise you, to this person, you will not, be at the end of days sharing your, outward last words with, usually it's a hospice nurse, but let's just say, loved ones, right? You won't say, I shouldn't have sat down and enjoyed my retirement. You'll probably say something along the lines of, I wish I wouldn't have made myself feel guilty about enjoying sitting down and doing nothing.
Yeah. It I I don't understand why. I mean, I do. It's part of our culture that, like you were saying about productivity, resting is actually part of being productive. And we look at it as being lazy. And it's not. I somebody said this before. I can't give credit to whoever said it, but they talked about wellness and how if in a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Oh, sorry about that. That 10:30 alarm. I need to turn it off. if if physical activity and nutrition were the bread ends on a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, the peanut butter and jelly would be rest and sleep. It's necessary for us to not just survive, but thrive. And that's what radical self care is. It's about thriving, it's about creating the life where you don't need constant escape routes, like Heidi said, because the foundation of your day to day life is fulfilling, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. And another key piece of self-care, especially those who are looking for connection, right? Who want to engage in community, or, get things outside of just free time and alone time. We got to play, everybody. We're humans. We got to get out there and bounce around. We've got to be silly. We're here doing this podcast now, and we're in front of you, and we're talking about this subject, which is a serious subject, but it's also about playfulness. And in the moments leading up to this podcast, we were cracking each other up and being silly in our virtual community, which, make time for that. Have a game night, invite friends over, FaceTime. If you are living far away from, let's just say, your bestie or whatever, you guys could make a FaceTime date, and it's like, okay, let's do facials today. Put on your mask and FaceTime me, and you both show up looking like, how we look ridiculous when we wear those things around. But to do something in tandem, like you could even say, hey, you want to cook together today? And you prop your phone up in the kitchen and you start making, you be making your vegetarian stuff, and I'd be saying, I don't want to show you this dead cow that I'm making over here. But we would still have fun with that. Do you know what
I
I
still
mean?
I still cook dead cows for my family. It's all good.
Oh God, we're in so much trouble now.
Oops.
Uh,
Oh,
Yeah, go
go
ahead.
ahead. I was
Oh,
just going to say, questioning beliefs. We talk about Socratic questioning, Heidi, a lot of times, and we have these beliefs that have been passed down to us. And so, one of the things that I ask myself is is this a belief that's been passed down to me? And if it is a belief that's been passed down to me, is it from a credible source? What's the evidence that supports that, this is whatever I'm believing that it is? And thoughts are not facts. Thoughts are thoughts. Beliefs are beliefs. Feelings are feelings. Feelings are valid, but a lot of times they come from thoughts or beliefs that come from society or whatever. We were talking a lot about women, but men experience the same thing, where they have these certain expectations that they've put on themselves or society's put on them, and not being able to take time out for themselves. I've been on the other end of it, where I've told y'all this before, and it's kind of embarrassing when I think about it, because I'm not a needy person and I'm not a jealous person. However, my husband, he's very routinized, and so he works out on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays. It's every week he has the same routine. And one week I got up earlier and I wanted him to spend time with me, and he's like, no, this is my schedule, this is what I'm doing, this is what I need to do. And I went into this whole, well, it's not like you have to work, you can do this anytime. And I was trying to guilt him into not doing what he needed to do for self-care. And then I start letting that fester, and I start telling myself stories based on my own beliefs. And it ends up, he doesn't care about me. These things are more important than me. He's exercising while I'm not. He's probably trying to be a role model for me because he thinks that I'm a fat ass. Now I've created this whole story that he thinks I'm a fat ass and I don't work out like I should. And he's trying to be a role model for me. And I'm walking around the house huffing and puffing and slamming cabinets because of this story that I created myself. And he's like, what the hell is going on here? What did I do? And I have to go through that whole Socratic questioning in my head. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I just created this whole story right within myself. And I tried to take away his need for
his
self care.
self-care.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's so messed up.
Let me just
Right,
usurp self-care right now.
right.
Yeah. But understanding where it came from, and
Hmm.
getting clear on it, and then being able to spin it and go, oh my God, look at me being so silly here, is also useful. But I think what you sensed was a need out of that. You probably figured out how to get that need met in another way.
Yeah. Sleep in like I normally do.
find a different way. What you all were saying earlier, with the phone rules reminds me of setting boundaries.
Oh, that's
So, yeah, I was wondering if you could talk, Dr. Lovey, about standards,
Mhm.
boundaries,
Yeah,
expectations.
I think this is a really great topic. Well, first of all, y'all are watching or listening to Life in Coast to Coast, and we are talking about radical self-care, self-care. Okay, so what's interesting is this word boundaries gets thrown around a lot. And the way that it's used, there's a lot of misunderstandings about it. It's used or misused in a way to change other people, where it turns it into like this tool to manipulate instead of a tool for self-care, right? So a standard is what you're saying yes to. So a standard is um, deciding what you'll accept and embodying that. So, what are my values? What's important to me? What are my standards? Expectations are what you're hoping that somebody else will do, right? How they'll behave towards you. A boundary is not telling someone what they need to do or to change them. It's telling them how you'll respond if they cross a line or if they compromise your standards in some kind of way. So boundaries are for you. They're not a way to control or manipulate other people. They're not ultimatums. They're just guidelines for your own well-being. So expectations are hopes, wishes. They focus outwardly. They rely on other people to meet your needs and your desires. An example would be, I expect that my husband will remember our anniversary and plan something special. That's an expectation. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's what's going to happen. And I always say, if all else fails, lower your expectations. That's an expectation, though. A standard, right? I know I'm repeating over, but I'm just trying to say it in another way. It's an internal decision, right? So it's about what you'll accept, um, how you want to show up in your life for yourself. It's not relying on other people. It's about what you want to embody for yourself. So I prioritize relationships where respect and kindness are the foundation. So that's a standard, right? So then the boundary would be, um, if you speak to me disrespectfully, I'll leave the conversation until we can talk calmly. So I'm not telling that person what to do. I'm telling them, because of this standard, this is the line. So a key distinction is, it's not, you can't talk to me like that, an attempt to control them. It's more, I won't stay in the conversation where I'm being disrespected. So it's a personal action.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I think, you know, boundaries in essence safeguard our energy,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So that
Absolutely.
we
Mm-hmm.
recognize we don't, you know, if you feel your energy go in a discussion with someone going from calm, contemplative, and
Mm-hmm.
productive to threatened, you know, and, you know, withdrawing and angry and whatever, if you find that that's happening,
Yeah.
then it's like, oh, and I use my hands a lot when I'm setting boundaries. It's like, oh, you know
That
what?
looks like stop.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
like, this is taking a turn that I don't want to take with you. Yeah, exactly. I don't want to take this turn with you. Let's revisit this. And sometimes it's as simple as that. I do this with my husband. Sometimes he can be very bombastic and you know, about things.
Mr. Bombastic.
Mr. Bombastic. And I'll be like, whoa, dude, we can so talk about this later. And when I speak Californian to him, he loves it. So, you know, I can get myself out of a lot of things with a little cue like that. But it's a boundary nonetheless, you know, and I'm not telling him to be quiet or to change his energy. I'm telling him this is not feeling good to me.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. So what about expectations for you? Because for me, a lot of times, if I have expectations, it's going to lead to frustration. So I think that that's why that distinction matters. If it's unmet, if I'm depending on somebody else, that's going to lead to frustration. Do you have certain expectations? Because I mean, I think that we do have expectations in relationships. It's just,
we all have expectations in relationship, especially, you know, in closed quarters when we are living with other people. There are expectations around courtesy and kindness and respect and all of that stuff. But in terms of, you know, expecting someone else to think the way that I think, to say things the way that I say them, to do things the way that I do them, no. Because what happens every single time when we expect someone else to say, do, or believe the same way that we do, you can't even lower those. You got to let go. You know, we set ourselves up to fail every time. You know, you and me, the reason that we have the relationship that we have is that you don't expect me to do or be or think or say like you, and I don't you either. It's like I have to let go of the things about you that would drive me bonkers. 20 years ago I would have been, oh my god, I can't with you, let's just, we'll pick on time blindness because
That is so funny. I was just talking to my husband about how when you came out to visit, and I was like, well, you could come stay here. And you're like, no, because then I'll be having to wear a mask and I'll have to wash my hands every time before. I know that's so, I know.
no, but it's
I'm
but
a
it's
germaphobe.
true. Like,
Yeah.
for us to have a neutral territory to stay in takes all of that stuff off the table. And
Absolutely.
it's not like it's a non-negotiable. I would come to
Right.
your house, I'd bring my own mask and
I
gloves.
know.
It'd be a really good house guest.
You wouldn't have to wear a mask in my house. Yeah, I wear masks when I'm in crowds. I have that. I was that way before COVID though, I'm just weird like that.
She's just a germaphobe like
I
that.
am.
We love
I
that
am.
about her.
I am.
We do. So what would you say to someone who has expectations and then gets disappointed?
Mm.
I'd say you set yourself up for that. I mean, clear as kind, everybody. I would say to them, you set yourself up for that. And expectations are risky at best. What do you think, Dr. Love?
I was thinking to focus on what you can control. I- I- You know, I don't know if this is a good metaphor or not. If you can find one, tell me. I've said this before. If I'm standing up on the rooftop and I'm getting ready to throw a brick down, you can't control whether I'm going to throw it or maybe drop it by accident. You might be able to influence by yelling up at me, hey, I'm down here, don't throw. But you ultimately can't control if I throw it down, and you can't control the gravity, right? But you can focus on moving out of the way or putting your hands up over your head. So when I think about that, expectations, what's in my control here? What are my standards? Are they being compromised? People aren't going to always meet my expectations, but I can decide how I'm going to respond or whether I want to adjust my expectations, right? Um, and like I said, if all else fails, lower your expectations. It doesn't mean that you have to compromise your standards, though,
No.
when you lower expectations. Yeah. So if I had to say, go over the three distinctions again. So expectations, if your needs are unmet, you're going to feel frustrated. Standards are going to shape your self-worth. They're going to be what aligns with your values. Um, and you're going to feel misaligned if those are compromised. And a way to not compromise your standards is by setting a boundary, which is going to empower you. And it's going to give you control in the situation, not to control the other person, but to control your own well-being so that your standard isn't compromised. And sometimes it's going to take some negotiating and renegotiating based on your standards or values. Like, for example, I might have, okay, so can I just say this really quick? Is that okay? Like, I do an activity. Like when people talk about boundaries, right? I always say, we talk about boundaries so much, but the most important thing is defining your standards first, identifying, clarifying what your values are first, and then defining what your boundaries are to make it more concrete. And boundaries sometimes can be confusing because they're so abstract and they feel invisible. So what I'll have them do is I'll have them like write a circle on a piece of paper, and then all of the things that bring them comfort, all of the things that are important to them, their values, um, areas that give them joy, that give them peace. I have them write it inside of the circle. And then all of those tolerations, the things that bring them discomfort, the things that cause them stress, the things that cause them, discomfort, that don't make them feel safe, that don't make them feel supported or valued. I have them write it on the outside. So maybe inside it could be creativity. It makes me feel good, right? Getting a hug from somebody, but I could also have a hug on the outside if it's a stranger, right? So a hug from might be on the inside for my husband. Um, there could be certain people that might be on the outside, that might be on the inside, depending on what it is. So this is what I was going to say is I value family, and there are other things that I don't value, like um, dirtiness or whatever, right? So I might compromise and renegotiate that value because family is a more important value to me. So you can renegotiate boundaries anytime and say, okay,
What you're saying is when it comes
yeah,
to family, you
mm-hmm,
can you can take just so much dirt and not much more, right? And
right,
just we all, we all know what that means, and enough, of a boundary around that can either be, like when my adult children were like kind of coming and going before they were married and settled, it was like, all right, have a good time while you're here, but hang up your towels, put them in the dryer. If you don't want to hang them up, just turn the thing on. I do not want to come home from work and see your dishes. I love you to bits, but my days of, rinsing your dishes are long gone. And they've called me this tidy Heidi, and it's like, they know that about me.
I
So just
love
tidy
that.
up. It's not hard, but it's a standard, and it's an easy boundary to set. And if I go to their house, I don't get to say one thing about that. I either clean up their house or I deal with it.
So that's a way of renegotiating, right? So either
Totally.
cleaning or saying my value for spending time with them is more important than me having to be tidy Heidi right now. And so I'm going to put that aside for 2, 3 hours. And then when I get home, I'm going to do whatever I need to do to feel better. Right.
Or even a
So,
week, I mean,
mhm.
I love them dearly. I'll put up with it. Or like I said, I'll just bust out the vacuum. It's all good. But that's it being a choice. Then I'm satisfying my own standard, but I'm not putting my standards on others. That's not okay. That's not a boundary. That's manipulation.
Mm.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
There, this is amazing. You read some minds, Dr. Lovey, of these questions. You've been answering questions. I didn't even ask them. There's a very important question in the live stream chat I want to ask you all before we end the live stream. What are some suggestions for managing your expectations in relationships where you've started off not setting boundaries and
Mm,
now you want to implement them and the person isn't used to it?
Mm.
yeah, that's a lot of fun. And yeah, that's yeah. Okay. You have to have that qualifying conversation with them that says, I own that I have allowed for these behaviors of these needs of mine to go unmet. They're unmet needs of mine, and I have allowed them to be unmet. You've got to own your responsibility in that. And that levels the playing field, right? You're putting them on notice. This is on me. But now that I've discovered how important it is for me to hold my standards,
Mhm.
to be in integrity with my values, we're going to have to shift some things. And I know it's not going to be fun or comfortable. It's just not, you know, and they still may be unhappy about, they still may be rebuffed, still may rebuff you. It's still, will get dicey in there, but that's okay. Get in there, with your truth coming out.
Mhm.
Don't blame, don't point fingers, and use I statements.
Yes.
They
I
feel
feel.
blank,
Mhm.
you blank,
And not I feel like. I feel like is an I statement, a you statement disguised as an I statement because you can't say a feeling after like. So
No,
I feel
yeah. I
frustrated.
yeah, like I feel unheard
Mm-hmm.
when I come home to a sink full of dishes and wet towels on the floor in the bathroom. I
Mm-hmm.
feel unheard when that happens. And you can also say, you know, understanding, that you were in a hurry that one time.
Mm-hmm.
I get it, and I was able to deal with it. But, that doesn't mean that it isn't uncomfortable for me. I mean, that's a compromise there. but then you can reach back out and say, we can work on this. We can work on this. You have to have a give and take. You have to have an open dialogue. But if, on the other hand, and this happens often, let's just say you're in a 30-year marriage and the kids are gone and you're, retired, and your husband is, golfing and, whatever, fill in the blanks. And I'm speaking from a woman's perspective because that's the only one I have. So, they're out there doing all of their things or whatever. And then, they come home and they, say to you, oh, I'm going to use your car tomorrow. I'm going to go, whatever, or my husband, I love him because he takes care of my car. He'll say, I'm going to take your car into the dealer tomorrow and get your oil changed. And I'll be like, no, you're not, because I have a nail appointment. Well, can't you move it? I already made the appointment at the car dealership. No, I can't. And it's not that I'm unyielding, it's that that's the only time that I can do it. I have a busy schedule. I'm speaking personally here. But you can see how, this plays out in your own relationship. Again, get out that piece of paper, write it down, get really clear on what's important to you, where you're willing to compromise and where you're not.
Yeah. And it's okay to feel the way that you feel. I mean, going back to the example that I gave, I expect my husband to remember our anniversary, even if I don't. And I expect, because he's done these things in the past, and I just have this expectation. If it didn't happen, I might say, I felt hurt when you didn't do that. It doesn't mean that he has to change anything. I'm just telling him how I feel and what my needs are. I need to feel seen. I need to feel
Appreciate it.
appreciated, right? That might not, be some, have to do with anniversary or whatever, but you're telling them how you feel and what your needs are, and it's not going to put them on the defense.
Yeah. I now that you said that, this is so funny because this was when I was younger and married to the father of my 3 children. And I remember saying to him, it's about the big 5: Christmas, Valentine's Day, Mother's Day, my birthday, and our anniversary. And he would be like, well, most of those are Hallmark holidays. I'm like, I don't care. And he would say things like, well, but you're not my mother. I'm like, I'm the mother of your 3 children. I want a flipping card, and I set the expectation so that he could beat it. And then I wasn't upset or, having a bad Mother's Day. But the point is, you have to design that alliance up front. You have to say, this is what I need.
Yeah. And there are some things that are going to feel like an obligation when you're in a healthy relationship, but because of the mutual respect, and we've talked about love languages before, maybe we can do a segment on that, but knowing how somebody feels loved and how they like to give love it's really helpful. It helps. It definitely helps with the expectations for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like we've only tip of the iceberg to this
Oh
topic.
my gosh. Yes, we could go on and on. So I know that we only have like 5 minutes. You want to wrap it up with some action steps, or are there more questions? What?
Yeah, we handled the questions. I asked everybody what are they going to do for their self-care today? What's one thing? So would love to talk about action steps.
Yeah. And another question that I throw out there too is, has there been a time where your standards have been compromised because of a fear, or societal expectations on you, and how might you deal with that in the future? So how do we build sustainable self-care routines that work for us, Heidi? I think you said it, like asking yourself, what drains me, what fuels me, right?
Yeah, you right. Those 2 things: what takes my energy, what gives me energy. We can quantify everything in terms of energy for sure. And some of the, I'm just going to cruise through really quick. The chapters, and I really want to recommend Cheryl Richardson's book because it really is the quintessential one in my estimation. So if you're tired, rest. That's the first chapter. Second chapter, let me disappoint you, and that's all about boundaries. Say your no nicely. That's about delivery. Let your heart break. That's about being vulnerable and allowing yourself to process your painful emotions, right? The absolute no list. These are non-negotiable situations, behaviors. That's outside of your, your comfort there, right? The soul loving space is to design a supportive and nurturing environment for yourself, whatever that means for you. And then let me teach you how to treat me, right? We've touched on that a little bit. Again, boundaries. Tell the truth. Live authentically by expressing your true feelings. Don't hide behind polite dishonesty. Don't do that. Say goodbye to toxic people. That's a whole topic. And live in alignment with your soul. You have to identify and pursue activities and goals that align with your core values and your passions to create that sense of purpose, right? And prioritize yourself without guilt. I can't say that enough. We have to drop the guilt and say, this is good for me, and I'm going to do it regularly because I deserve it. That's a really big piece of it. And because I know that it will make me be better for whatever that is, my whole family, my work organization, those kinds of things. I don't think I really answered that question.
No, that was good. That was good. And one of my takeaways, it was, you didn't quote it this way, but you basically said clear is kind, and people are going to appreciate, even if they react like I did in the beginning with my husband. I respect him and I appreciate the clarity, and I know what his standard is. I know that he values that, and that's okay. And that's how it is with people in your life. It might be hard for them at first if they're used to you putting everything aside that you're in the middle of doing and going and making them a meal. Um, if they're used to that, they're going to expect that, but they'll get used to it and they'll be okay. They will be okay.
They'll be okay.
They'll be all right.
They won't be happy, but they'll be okay.
They'll be okay. What about as far as the explanation part? Do they deserve an explanation?
Yeah, to an certain, you deserve, I don't know, but why not offer it? Why not help solidify, the truth that you're standing in? I am doing this for myself because I've recognized it's what I need. And when you say that with love in your eyes to the person that loves you, if they truly love you, they will respect that and they will figure out how to meet you where you are,
Yeah.
I love that. We have to wrap it up. We only have
Okay.
30 seconds left.
Okay, so thank you for joining us on our journey today. Remember, self-care is not selfish, it's necessary. When you thrive, everything in your life that you touch is going to thrive as well. We'll see you next time on Lifing Coast to Coast. Until then, keep building the life that you don't need to escape from, right?
Yes.
Right. Okay.
And we are on all podcast streaming services too, so you can catch the replay. We're going to close it up with some concise thoughts, and you can catch whatever you missed there on Spotify, Apple Podcast, etc., etc.
Go get some me time.
Woo! All right, the live stream is over. Any closing thoughts, my friends, before we say goodbye?
Any closing thoughts, Heidi? Heidikins? I
Oh,
think I
God.
said my closing thoughts.
Yeah.
Good, you nailed it.
If this feels uncomfortable and you don't want to do it, I get you. I see you. Start with the number one thing, which is you need rest. If you're tuned into this and you haven't taken a moment to really think about what that means, slow down, catch a beat, do some breathing, maybe even close your eyes, and fantasize about what it would feel like if you lived a life of self-care. What would you imagine, in your wildest dreams that would feel like? And if that starts to feel a little good for you, maybe you're onto something that you want to incorporate.
Yeah. I was thinking about the expectations piece and standards. So sometimes we're afraid that it's going to come off as us being demanding, we could emphasize what we value. Like, instead of saying, I don't know, stop doing this or stop ignoring me, we could, say, I value clear communication. This is a need of mine. And with the expectations piece, having unrealistic expectations or putting expectations on people that I put on myself, that's especially like with my children and my husband, that's really big. So maybe something like, I realize I expected more than what was realistic. How can we move forward? I don't know. I think that would create more of a collaboration. Yeah.
Yeah. But part of it is designing the alliance.
Mm-hmm,
You know, my needs
yeah,
have
that's a good
changed. I'm asking you to change a little with me. Let's sit down and design what that's going to look like. What that's going to mean. And really, it's all about the open dialogue in all of this. And the things that are non-negotiable, that's where you have to learn to stick to your guns. My husband and the Sunday thing with the pajamas, I was like, if you don't want to see me in my pajamas, don't look at me. I'm going to sit here in my pajamas. You are not going to guilt me into getting dressed. That, good luck with that, and whatever connotation that was for him, whatever that meant. I knew that came from his family of origin. I know his people. I knew where it came from. And it was like, yeah, your mom doesn't guilt me into shit either. That's not going to happen, and, and there were some uncomfortable moments around that. Integrating into somebody else's family and being a strong person with clear boundaries. It was like, I wasn't just polite and acquiescing. I was like, no, I don't want to eat that, or I don't want to, or, oh my gosh, I can. This will be a recurring topic in podcasts to come, but Princess and the Pea. If the bed that I'm sleeping on is not comfortable, I made a big deal out of that. I'll just say that. And it was met with a new mattress the next time we came, and my husband was like, oh my God, my mom bought a new bed. And that was a big deal.
Oh my gosh. I love this. This has been such a good conversation. Thank you both. Thank you everyone for listening. You can find us next week for a brand new episode. Lifing Coast to Coast is coming to you because life is coming at
you.
Please like, comment, subscribe, follow, and stay tuned. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Lifing Coast to Coast. Join us every Saturday for insightful, relatable, and lively discussions that empower and inspire.